Have you ever sat back and pondered the mystery of the three-legged stool? And this thing is a marvel of physics and practicality. It has the exact number of legs you need. If you took one of those legs away, you would not have a stool. You'd have a messed up ladder that got you nowhere. If you add a leg, it actually becomes less stable, easier to push over, which is why evidently farmers swear by three-legged stools. If you go into farms, they use them all the time for milking cows. They use them because you can put them down on almost any surface, and because of the relationship of the legs and the triangles they form, it's just perfectly balanced. But you gotta have the legs equal distance at equal angles to the seat in order for it to work. If you don't build all three legs so that they're all at the same angle and the same length, then you're gonna have a wobbly stool. You're gonna have an adventure every time you sit down. And as I read and prayed and thought about this scripture for this week, it made me start to realize how much discipleship, following Jesus, is like a three-legged stool. When Jesus called the disciples there in what we just read, what did he call them to do? Three things: come, follow me, and fish. Now, if your experience of being a Christian, of following Jesus, has been wobbly or shaky, unsteady, then the chances are that perhaps one of these three legs, come, follow me, or fish, aren't quite built right, aren't quite the same length as the others, or set at the angle that the others are set at. Maybe some of us in here today are one-legged disciples, or maybe some are two. And maybe as we go through what Jesus said this morning, this will help us to become more stable, steady, unshakable Christians, and maybe even become a more steady, stable, unshakable church as well. So let's dive in and look at these three things that fully devoted followers of Jesus do. Number one is they come. They come. Jesus said, come to them. Let me illustrate this for you. Valentino, come here. Come. See, watch. Now watch what he has to do. Yeah, just pay attention to him. Thanks, bud. I'm real bassy up here. Can you feel the bass?
Yeah.
All right. Now that was pretty easy, right?
Yeah.
All right. What did that take? You're like a tank. These kids. What did that take for him to do that? He had to get up, leave his family, his parents, his brother, his cousins, and everybody, friends. He had to walk away from them and come, now he's with me. They look a little relieved, actually. Like, they spread out, they take up the room, right? Like, that wasn't hard because he knows you can go back. That was it was easy. He gets to go back. It's just a short little thing. He had to come up here, be embarrassed for a second, although he doesn't get embarrassed easy. But Jesus wasn't calling them to just, hey guys, can you come over here for a minute? When Jesus called them to come, he was calling them to come partner with him, to join themselves to him. Mark tries to help us understand how serious this was by going into a little bit more detail when he talks about Jesus calling James and John. He says, verse 19 and 20, when they had gone a little further, he sees James and John, the sons of Zebedee, and they're getting their nets ready. They're cleaning them up and everything because they'd been fishing all night. And without delay, he calls them and says, you guys, come. And they leave their father, Zebedee, that's a cool dad's name. They leave him there in the boat with the other workers, and they go and they partner with Jesus. That means, generations of their family had been fishing in those boats. There's a legacy to carry on. Their whole identity, we are the two sons of Zebedee. We are fishermen. That was their identity. Their primary relationship. That was everything. And when Jesus says, come, what they had to do was stand up, walk away from what had been their primary identity, and take on a new center to their primary identity in life. Coming to Jesus means changing the center of our primary identity, changing the center of what is the primary relationship? Think about what that means for us. Think about it. What are the things that people use to identify themselves. Just begin to think through the things that, race, probably one of the first things that come to mind, nationality, your sports teams, your family, the town you grew up in, maybe the state you grew up in, the city you grew up in, geography, right? The social class you're a part of, the job or career title you have, the amount of the degrees you have or the intellect, right? These are all things that can be centers of our identity. Your health, your fitness, that can be the center of your identity, whether it's I'm super healthy or I'm really, really not healthy, right? Those can both be centers of your identity. A disease can become the center of your identity. I'm this sickness. Many things can take over and become addiction can become the center of your identity. I am this habit that I cannot break. Hurts, anger, fear, emotions can become central to our identity. Sexuality can become central to our identity. And for most people, their identity is a cocktail of a few of these different things mixed together, and that becomes the center of their identity. But coming to Jesus means no matter what your identity or center of identity was beforehand, you put that aside and Jesus becomes the center of your identity from now on. This means you can't come to Jesus via negotiation. You can't come to Jesus saying, okay, Jesus, I love the part that you teach about, loving me, but I don't like what you say about sexual ethics, so, I'll take this, but I'm not, not that. Or Jesus, I like what you say about justice, I'm for that, but some of those things you said about forgiveness, I don't know, that doesn't seem quite like that fits life today, so I'm gonna put that aside. We come to Jesus negotiating, and a lot of people, they'll ask you about Christianity, so what am I allowed to do? What am I not allowed to do? Like the list, okay, well I could take that, but I won't take that. So we bring these other things into it to negotiate. If I'm going skydiving, and the trainer teaching me to skydive says, here's your pack with your parachute. Never put anything else in it, no snacks. This is your parachute pack. Don't mess with this thing. And I'm like, well, that's fine, but I'll do it. I'll wear the pack, but I also want to keep my colony of moths in the pack with my parachute. And some of you are thinking, well, that's stupid. Everybody knows a group of moths isn't called a colony, it's called an eclipse. Now you're all going to be looking that up on your phones. No, the real stupid thing is what? Why would you negotiate with the person trying to make sure you don't die? The person trying to make sure you live. Right? Why would you try to negotiate? Why wouldn't you just come and say, okay, show me the way? We don't come to Jesus via negotiation. Coming to Jesus requires a complete surrender of who I am to who he is. That's what coming to Jesus means. And look, here's the thing. A lot of people don't want to do this because it doesn't make sense. If Jesus isn't God, if Jesus didn't die on that cross, rise from the grave, then this is stupid. It doesn't make any sense. It's nonsense. But Jesus is God. Jesus demonstrated that he is God. Jesus did die on that cross for our sin, and Jesus did rise from the grave. Jesus did all those things. And so when we come to him, we have to come saying, here I am, I surrender it all. I'm not holding any piece back. I'm not negotiating. I surrender my ego, my sexuality, my appetites, my habits, my mind, my body, my everything, my emotions, all of it. I put them all in your hands. You order my life now. That's what coming to Jesus really means. And a lot of people want to reduce Christianity to just this first leg of the stool. It's just like, hey, you need to come to Jesus. You need Jesus. You need to come to Jesus. And we only focus on this one leg. And then what we do after we say, oh, it's all about just getting people to come to Jesus, is we severely underestimate what it means to come to Jesus. We start settling for, instead of a fully developed leg where we've actually come to Jesus and made him the center of our identity, we settle for just admiring Jesus, which is just a little nub of a leg, which is never going to work in this stool we call discipleship. Listen to what the great Danish philosopher and theologian Søren Kierkegaard said about the difference between admiration for Jesus and real discipleship. I know you probably read Kierkegaard a lot, so you probably can quote this along with me, but here's what he said. He said, If you have any knowledge at all of human nature, you know that those who only admire the truth will, when danger appears, become traitors. You've seen that. You know that truth. The admirer is infatuated with the false security of greatness, but if there's any inconvenience or trouble, he pulls back. Admiring the truth instead of following it is just as dubious as the fire of erotic love. You're going to recognize this is true too. He says this erotic love, which at the turn of a hand can be changed into exactly the opposite, to hate and jealousy and revenge. Christ, however, never asked for admirers, worshipers, or adherents. He consistently spoke of followers and disciples. Jesus is looking for disciples who will come to him. That is just the first leg. There are two more. And some of you have embraced this first leg, and you're practicing this because it's not something you just do once. That's another mistake we make. Coming to Jesus is something you do every day and throughout each day, because every day and throughout each day, it means you and me deciding Jesus is the center of my identity. I surrender who I am to him. That's what it means to come to Jesus. But now we've got to go on. If you're just a one-legged stool, you're going to fall over. One-legged disciples aren't disciples. So we need to go to leg two. Leg two is this. It's follow. Jesus says, come, follow me. Do I need to make Valentino come up and follow me around just to show you what this looks like? No, I won't do that to you. We know what follow me looks like. It means you follow, literally, they followed him around. This was like on-the-job training. And so they started following Jesus around. And the very next things that happen here in Mark, they're following Jesus. Jesus goes into the synagogue where all the people from the town would gather to learn about God and to worship God. And Jesus begins to teach. And they sit there alongside Jesus as he's teaching there in the synagogue. And everyone in there is amazed. Everyone from the whole town, they're packing into the place, and they're saying things like, we've never heard anybody teach this way or speak this way with such power, with such wisdom, and it's transforming their lives, hearing the truth about who God is and who they are. And they're learning this whole new way of relating to God and understanding God. Not only is that happening, while Jesus is teaching, because they're following him, they're right with him, a guy who's plagued by a demon comes running in and starts yelling at Jesus. What are you going to do? What's Jesus going to do? And what Jesus does is he silences that demon inside that man, and he casts it out of him, sends it out of him, and heals and delivers that man from his trouble. And then a few moments later, they find out Peter's mother, the first disciples, his mother-in-law, rather, I should say. His mother-in-law was sick with a fever and dying. And Jesus goes and heals her, and she gets up and cooks food for all of them. And then just a moment later, they're walking through the same town, and a guy with leprosy. Leprosy is this horrible skin disease that they believed was very, very communicable, and so if you were a leper, you had to stay outside the town. So runs up to Jesus, and Jesus doesn't go, eh. Jesus touches him and heals him. And this is all within 100 yards. I've stood there in this town in Capernaum. I've been there on the shore. And literally, you stand on that shore where Jesus met the disciples and called them to come. And then you go maybe a couple 100 feet and you get to this place. Go to the next slide, where you have Peter's house. See that building on the left with the red arrow? That's a Catholic chapel that's been built over the place. Go to the next one. Because underneath that is this, which is where Peter's house was. We know with pretty decent certainty this is where his house was. And then you go just another, 50 feet or so, and you're in the synagogue. That's the blue arrow mark. It's just a little bit away. And look inside there. We got a picture of that too. And that's where Jesus is teaching. So all this is happening within the length of a football field. And so within that one football field, what have they learned about following Jesus? One, we're learning a whole new way to relate to God and know God. But not just that. Although that was the thing that stuck with people. They saw the miracles happening, but the thing everybody was mostly talking about was the things Jesus taught and said. And so they were impressed. They were learning that. They were learning what Jesus was teaching about life. But then through the miracles as well, what did they learn from those miracles? Following Jesus means that I'm going to care for troubled people. It means I'm going to be willing to touch people that other people aren't willing to touch. It means I'm even going to be able to love mothers-in-law. You might think that's a dangerous statement because Christina's mom is sitting right over here. But she's not my mother-in-law. She's my mother-in-love, right? Yes, there you go. Speaking of taking your life into your hands, following Jesus in situations like they learned, because this was just the beginning, this was all just the very, very beginning. As they followed Jesus, they learned that following him meant oftentimes you're taking your life in your hands. Not just because someone's going to try and hurt you or kill you, because that wasn't necessarily what was happening right then and there. But that each day when you go and start caring for people who are troubled, touching people no one else wants to touch, and giving yourself this way, it begins to feel a lot like you're losing your life. It begins to feel a lot like, well, I'm laying my life down and doing all this to care for these other people and sacrifice for them. And that's what makes following Jesus a challenge. That's why most people, as they got closer to Jesus and past the aura of miracles and crowds and began to realize what he was actually saying and calling them to, they walked away. They walked away and eventually called for his death. Most people walk away because they thought following Jesus is going to cost my life. They didn't realize following Jesus is what's going to give you life. Let me show you what this looks like. With a story I heard, John Ortberg, who's a famous author and pastor, he once shared a story about a friend of his who almost died swimming in Mexico in the ocean. He calls his friend Jimmy. And Jimmy and his son Davey, little boy, and their whole family and in-laws and his cousin, they were all there on vacation in Mexico together and at the beach, and suddenly Jimmy and his son, they were out swimming, and this riptide, you know what a riptide is? It's just like this undertow, it's just this rogue riptide came in and started just pulling his son out. His son was caught in it, and it'll pull you out to sea. Sometimes people have gotten pulled out miles. And so he was a decathlete. This guy was solid, and he went after his son, but then he got caught up in the riptide too. So there he is with his son, but they're caught, they can't get out. This guy is an athlete, but you can't swim against that. And he's trying, and he tries to yell, but they're already too far away. No one from the beach can hear them. And the thought going through his mind is, this is it. My family's going to have a double funeral to end their vacation. But his cousin on the beach saw them starting to get taken out to sea, and he realized what was going on. He understood that these riptides can happen, and he knew what to do. So he ran down the beach because they were getting pulled out by this riptide. So he ran down the beach to this place where there was a sandbar, and he ran out on that sandbar to the point where he's past where they are. There's a long sandbar. And he starts yelling to them, come over here to me, which kind of meant swimming away from the shore. Swim away from you think safety's that way, going to shore, but he's like, come to me, come out to me, because that's where, and that's how you live through that. You swim sideways until you get to a point where you can get out of that tide. But they swam out to him and saved their life. Everything in you and me in that moment would think, I need to go that way because that's the way to the shore, not I need to go that way. But they lived because they heard his voice and they did what he said. They came to him. They followed his voice. Coming to Jesus, following Jesus, will feel like you're losing your life. It'll feel like you're giving up your life. It'll feel at times like you're going the wrong direction because everyone else seems to be over there. But by laying down your life, you find it. This is the truth of Scripture, as paradoxical as it may seem. By holding on to your life, you lose it. But by letting go, you grab hold of it. Because Jesus is the only one who can actually give us life. And this is one of those legs in the stool that often gets cut short. You know, we kind of embrace this, okay, I come to Jesus, yes. But now when it comes to this follow Jesus, that's the one where we follow him to a point and then we get uncomfortable and we start to come up short. That's not going to be a stable relationship. That's not going to be stable discipleship. This leg of following has to grow all the way out to the point where we trust him, so that we can have a balanced relationship as disciples. And if this second leg is the one that's hard to grow all the way out, the third one is the one that many of us never bothered to grow at all. The third thing that truly devoted, fully devoted followers of Jesus do, the third thing Jesus calls us to do, the third leg of this stool, is to go fish. Jesus said, "Come, follow me, and I will send you out to fish for people." There's a reason why most of us don't do this hardly ever. And I think it comes down to simply this: we don't really trust in Jesus. The Gospel of Luke tells the longer version of this story, the calling of the disciples. And I think maybe it can help us figure out and maybe encourage us to trust Jesus so that we actually follow through and do this. Because it's scary. It's scary, this idea of going fishing for other people to lead them to Jesus. But listen to the way Luke explains what happened that day. He gives us some more of the details. He tells us Jesus had been speaking there on the shore in Capernaum, and the people were pushing him into the water. The crowds were getting so big that Jesus kept getting pushed back to the point where now he's standing in the water. So there's Peter and Andrew, and they've got their boat pulled up close to the shore, and they're cleaning their nets from fishing all night. And Jesus just climbs up into their boat and says, "Hey guys, just push out a little bit." And so they go out a little bit so Jesus can sit there on the boat and talk to everybody and not get drowned in the water. So Jesus does that for a while, and they're sitting there cleaning their nets. They got front row seats to listen to Jesus, and everyone else is on the shore listening. And when Jesus is done teaching, he says to them, "Hey guys, well, push out to the deep water. Let's go fishing. I want you to drop your nets again." And you all probably remember this story and how it goes. Peter's like, "Jesus, I mean, we've been fishing all night. We didn't catch a thing." In other words, Jesus, we're the fishermen. You're the preacher. Why don't you stick to what you do? But he says, "Nevertheless, because it's you, because you say so, I'll let down the nets." And you know what happens. They're out there, they drop the nets, and instantly, fish fill their nets. The nets begin to tear. They call to James and John to come help them. So James and John, they come up with their boat. They start pulling all the fish in. There's so many fish that both boats begin to sink into the water. And they were amazed, and they were astonished. But Peter's reaction was weird. You'd think Peter would say, "Jesus, you want a job? Why don't you work with us, Jesus, every day? Like, we'd be done by 3 minutes after we start every day." But no, he says, "Go away. Please go away, Lord, because I'm a sinful man." Something would happen in that moment went beyond just being amazing, being a miraculous thing. It went to the point where Peter realized Jesus is divine and didn't want to be in the presence because he knew he didn't deserve to be. Something was going on there. I was sitting on the shore right there with a handful of other pastors who are good friends of mine, and my really good friend, who many of you know, Jason, who served there in Israel for over a decade. And we were talking about this, and Jason was teaching us things he had learned while he was there. And he was telling us, what a lot of people hear this story and it sounds astonishing. Like all those fish, after they had tried, what do those fishermen know? Jesus, he knows where to fish, right? But it's not that it was improbable. What happened was impossible. And he pointed out to us, do you remember when Peter said, "We've been fishing all night"? Why do you think they were fishing at night? I'm like, well, what do we know? It's like, because the nets they used were the kind of nets that you had to use at night, because if you use them during the day, the fish would see them. So they didn't fish with these nets at night. Because if you in the daytime, because if you threw them out in the daytime, the fish would see them and they'd swim away. It's not like they're scooping nets to catch fish. They put the nets out, the fish swim into it. You throw those nets out during the day, fish are like, "That's a net," and they go the other way. So in that moment, broad daylight, they throw down this net, super obvious, And Peter's standing there in the boat watching these fish willingly just swimming into that net. He knew instantaneously, this isn't something that's just unlikely. This is an impossible thing that Jesus is doing here. He knew as the professional fisherman. Imagine if you're a baker. I don't know if some of you in here work in bakeries. And Jesus comes into your bakery, and all of a sudden he makes like your oven spit out 1 million perfect loaves of bread. It's like, wow, he really knows how to bake. No, it's not just that he really knows how to bake or knows where to get fish or how to make bread. Something impossible is being done. Or you're a bus driver and Jesus gets on the bus with you, and all of a sudden everybody seems to get on neatly and organized. No one tries to cheat the bus system anymore, and suddenly no one's cutting you off all day as you're driving through. There's no traffic, all the lights are green. Like, that's not unlikely, that's impossible. Right? Just get your mind in that place where you can maybe begin to experience what Peter was experiencing in that moment, realizing this is divinity. This is holiness that I'm with. This is impossible happening. And that's the next thing Jesus did after that is he told them, Peter, don't be afraid. From now on, you're going to fish for people. That's the context of this. It's scary, this idea of going out and fishing for people and trying to, lead people and show them who Jesus is, talking to them at work, at home, in your neighborhood. That's scary. We're like, how do I do that? And honestly, it seems impossible. Think about all the people you know who are your age. As I get older, I think about all the people I know who are my age. How likely is it they're going to change their mind about anything? Much less change the center of their identity. Seems impossible, right? And scary. But what is the role Jesus called them to in this? What was the role he called them to? He said, be willing to be inconvenienced. They had just washed their nets. Now they're going to get dirty again. Be willing to be inconvenienced and just put the net in the water. That's it. You don't got to figure out how to get the right bait. If you do, you're probably going to mess it up, and you're going to be trying to lure people to Jesus with something that's not Jesus. I think we call that bait and switch, right? You don't got to figure out the right hook. You don't got to figure out any of that stuff. All you and I need to do, be willing to be inconvenienced and put the nets in the water. That's it. I don't need technology to figure out where the fish are. Just put the net in the water. Obvious for everyone to see. Not trying to make it look like something else. Not trying to make it look like it's just a really nice community to be part of. It'll make you happy. You'll have people to be there with you when you go through rough times. And we throw all those things around. But no, what it is come, make me the center of your identity. Jesus, not me. Follow, be willing to surrender your life, and go put the net out for others. That's the call. That's what Jesus calls us to do. Here's Jesus, here's who he is, here's what he did, here's what he asks you to do. Jesus does the rest. Jesus does the rest. But when we're afraid and when we don't trust, maybe because you've tried it and things didn't go well, and maybe you're thinking, yeah, but Jesus was in the boat with them. But here's what we have. God is with us. Just as much, the Holy Spirit is with us. Jesus sent the Holy Spirit to be with us, present with us, going with us, leading us. And he will give you and I the strength to go through the inconvenience, to push out into the deep water. He'll give you the strength to just put the net out. And he'll give you the strength to pull it in when Jesus fills it, whenever Jesus fills it. And he'll keep you from being pulled under by the weight of it too. Some of us, I'm just such a burden for souls, and you walk around and you talk that way. Jesus is calling us to care enough to go around putting the net out, not just feeling a feeling, but to drag that net everywhere you go, trusting in him. From the day Jesus poured out the Holy Spirit on the church, Peter and those other disciples, they stopped dragging nets in the water. And they started dragging nets everywhere they went. Not literal nets, but they dragged the gospel everywhere they went. It was there for everyone to see, plain and simple and obvious. Here's Jesus. Everyone could see it. And many, many, many people swam right up to them because they recognized Jesus calling through them. No tricks, no traps. Here it is. I fish for people. Let me challenge you this morning as you think about this image of the stool and these three legs. The first one to come, make Jesus the center of your identity. The second one to follow, be willing to lay down your life, follow him and do what he did. And three, to go fish. Let me just smack you with this. And I'm smacking myself at the same time. Stools with two legs aren't stools. So disciples who don't go fish aren't disciples. There are three things that fully devoted followers of Jesus do. Three things that fully devoted followers of Jesus do. They come to Jesus, they make him the center of their identity. They follow Jesus, laying down their life to do the things Jesus did, and they fish for other people, dragging the net of the gospel everywhere they go. No matter what the inconvenience, trusting that Jesus will do the catching. Come, follow, fish. That's it. Worship team, would you just start to make your way back? I want to give us all a chance to respond to Jesus' words today. So would you stand with me? And I want us to get used to responding to Jesus' words by spending time praying with and for each other around this altar and in the seats. That's fine too. And so listen to me this morning. We're going to sing a song in a minute, Arms Open Wide. It's not Jesus, here I am, take this part of me. It's Jesus, here I am. Right? That's what it takes. As we're singing this song, and even before we start to sing, even now in this moment, if you want to respond to some part of Jesus' call to you today, maybe you're the person who you've never taken that first step of coming to Jesus. And this morning you want to say, Jesus, I want you to be the center of my identity. Or maybe you did that once, but it hasn't been lived out. Then right now, I want you to just step out and come right up here to the front. Or maybe you're the person who you've done that, but following isn't the thing. You're struggling to go through life doing the things Jesus did and going where he wants you to go. And maybe that's what Jesus is saying to you, saying, I call you to follow me now. Actually follow me. Do what I do. And that's the place where he's saying, I want you to do that. And today you need to answer that call and say, Jesus, yes, I will do that. And step out and make that commitment. Yes, I'm going to do that. Or maybe you're in the place where this fishing thing has just been the thing you're not doing, not willing to do, you're scared to do. And so as we've been talking about it, Jesus is saying to you, be my disciple. I want you to go fish. I want you to put this net out everywhere you go. And I'm going to bring people to me through it. And you hear Jesus saying to you today that you need to do this. And you want to step out and say, Jesus, I need to do this. I'm committing to do this. Holy Spirit, help me to do it. And whatever of those things is the thing for you today, then I ask you to just step out, come to the front, and say, Jesus, I'm willing to do it. That's all. And if you can't do that step, then you won't do any of the others. This is easy. This is we all love each other here. No one's looking down on anybody here for anything. So this is the easy thing. Come out as we sing, and let's gather around this altar and pray for each other.